Welcome to the Emotional Intelli-Gents podcast, a podcast where we explore the intersection of emotional intelligence and leadership. And whether you're a seasoned executive or just starting out in your leadership journey, we're going to share practical tips, inspiring stories, and expert insights to help you develop your emotional intelligence and achieve your goals. So sit back, relax, and get ready to take your leadership skills to the next level. I'm Ismail.
And I'm Sameer. All right, Ismail. We are officially 10 episodes into our podcast, and we've had a lot of people ask us to talk more about ourselves. I thought the podcast was to talk about emotional intelligence, our leadership style, and a lot of people are like, hey, man, tell us about Ismail. Who is this guy that you've been on this podcast with? And I'm sure you've gotten questions about me. So we wanted to spend some time, what we're coining as the Meet the Gents episode, just a short bonus episode to give you guys a glimpse into who Sameer and Ismail are as people, as leaders, as business professionals, as family men. And so we want to give you some more insights into Ismail and Sameer. Does that sound good?
I think is a fantastic idea.
All right, cool. So Ismail, why don't we kick things off? You telling our listeners how we met and how we decided to do a podcast together.
Sure. So Sameer and I, we know each other. It's almost fate in the sense that our wives are cousins. And
Yes.
and they're really close. And not only are they cousins, but they're friends. Therefore, you and I also become automatically friends. But our first actual encounter was before I married my now wife, when I was like courting her, so to speak. And we were in New York. We had finished one of our Friday prayers, and you just happened to be there. And you stepped out. This is like the Sameer that I know. Stepped out, like, "Hey, are you Ismail?" And that was the first time that we ever met. Which, I mean, it's a great memory. It will be one that I'll have forever.
That was probably, I would say, 10 or 11 years ago.
Correct. That is correct. Right.
Yeah. And just to clarify, I know that Ismail and I are both Indian, and we confused you with all those relationships. Ismail and I are not cousins, and our wives, we are not cousins with our wives either. So I just want to clarify that.
Yes.
So our wives are first cousins. They grew up together. They're super close. And so we married into the family. So we're kind of the outsiders coming in. And it's been a really fun experience being living near each other, our kids growing up together. Yeah. So you guys are probably wondering, why are these guys always recording in the middle of the night? It's because that's the only time we get to ourselves, basically, at this point. So that's how we met. What about the podcast?
So, I mean, I think when we were getting to know each other, I believe we went on this trip to Tennessee, just a bunch of the cousins and friends, and we got to talking. I think the first really interesting conversation that we had was it was very early morning departure, and you and I were sitting up front, and we just started talking. We started talking about life and work, and a couple of situations that you were facing happened to come up. And I'll say I happen to have an opinion and some insight into those topics. And those turned into this kind of flourishing relationship. But the specific topic, there was a little bit of a topic. The topic was imposter syndrome. I remember correctly, right?
Yes.
And I think we had a phenomenal connection there. And from that connection, all of the subsequent conversations that we had generally revolved around things that we really enjoyed. And I think that was leadership type activities and topics and problems that we've had, and how to make progress in life in general. And it crosses both personal and career, but we really, I think, bonded over this joint affection towards career and leadership.
Yeah, and specifically emotional intelligence, which both of us employ regularly, not just in our work life, but in our personal life. And we really prescribe to emotional intelligence as a way of life. And so Ismail and I it was COVID. It was, social distancing, and him and I met in a Whole Foods parking lot one night at like 10 p.m. We brought lawn chairs, and this is like peak COVID, when everyone thought that like you were going to infect anyone you encountered. And we sat in this Whole Food parking lot from like 10 to like 1 a.m. And we just had like this really good conversation. And I remember Ismail saying, man, we should have recorded that
Yeah. Yep.
conversation. And so that kind of like gave birth to the idea of Ismail and I starting a podcast about leadership, specifically emotional
Hmm.
intelligence. And then, throughout COVID, obviously my wife had a baby. Ismail had little kid, a young son. And so the timing just wasn't right ever until
Hmm.
recently, till 2023. So, March 1st, 2023, we launched our podcast and our first episode. But I think one thing I just want to call this out. Ismail is downplaying the significance of that first conversation we had on imposter syndrome because he flat out changed my life with that conversation because I was a young manager, probably, I probably had like a couple years deep of like leading large teams. I thought I was way in over my head in the position that I was in. And he completely flipped my perspective on like what being a leader is. And I was just like, holy crap. Like, okay. Like I went home like, and I really prescribed to a ton of the things that he told me, and I've carried that with me throughout the rest of my career. And we're definitely going to do an episode on imposter syndrome, and I'll share exactly the insights that he gave me. But he's downplaying, how important that conversation
Well,
was.
I'm glad that it was helpful, and I can rightly say that I've learned and gleaned so many nuggets from our conversations as well. So it's been
Yeah,
mutually
you,
beneficial. I really, really must
yeah,
say. Um,
yeah. You've learned a lot of good dad jokes
yeah,
from me
the
too, I'm
dad
sure,
jokes. I love the
over
dad.
time.
Well, I mean, so tell me, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
So yeah, sure. I mean, that's always such a loaded question. Tell me about yourself. It kind of like makes my palms sweaty every time anyone asks me that. But I'll jump right in. I mean, uh, uh, I born and raised in Chicagoland area. Went away for school, went away for law school, came back and settled here in Chicago. I started my career actually in the legal profession. I am an attorney by trade, licensed in the state of Illinois, and I was practicing law, and I really didn't enjoy the traditional practice of law. That was just a personal thing. I think it's a great profession for those of you that are lawyers. But just for me, I wanted to be more in a corporate environment, and I really enjoyed the business side of the legal profession, but not necessarily, the day to day grind of it, I would say. So I got into the wireless telecommunications industry, where I've really spent the better part of my career, and now I've gotten into roles that are at the executive leadership level, and my roles are really around developing teams and developing processes and tools and managing the business. And so I think it's really interesting, and through that experience, I've I've had the pleasure of leading small teams. I've led large teams. Currently, I have a team of 65 plus people in my organization. At one point, I had over 80 people in my organization. So I've kind of seen it all from a people leadership standpoint. And so the one thing that's really resonated with me throughout my career has been uh, em- the emotional intelligence skills that I've been able to implement and employ. And so I've seen like just the impact it's had on my ability to be a good leader. And so I felt so passionately and about sharing that. And so to me, this podcast is an opportunity not to really tell you guys about from an academic standpoint, emotional intelligence. Like we quote research, we talk about articles, we talk about studies on this podcast. But if you're looking for like a really academic podcast that's heavily researched, and that's not necessarily what I'm here for. I am here to kind of give you guys my boots on the ground experience, give you examples of things that have personally happened to me, and throughout my career, from being a young manager to now being an executive leader, and what lessons I learned along the way, and hopefully through this podcast help you guys and save you from running into a lot of the pitfalls that I ran into. I've had a lot of sleepless nights worrying about things that I had no business worrying about, and I would love to save you all from having those sleepless nights, and so that's kind of what I think about when I think about this podcast. I want it to be practical. I want it to be rooted in real life experiences that Ismail and I have had and what our guests have had that we're going to have on this show in the future. And each episode, you should walk away with some kind of practical tip that you can apply along your own leadership journey and your own journey on becoming a more emotionally intelligent person. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. But Ismail, I'd love to flip that question right back at you. So why don't you tell us more about yourself?
Sure. So I'm born and raised in Canada, Calgary, Alberta. So I am a Canadian, now U.S. citizen by
So
way of
you're
marriage.
a boot. You're a boot to that Canadian life.
I am a
Nice.
boot to life. I like the maple syrup, hockey, camping, and build excellent igloos. Right?
And you're very nice
Yeah,
because you're from
yeah.
Canada.
I apologize for being so nice. I'm sorry about that. Um, and from there, so I've moved around the world, worked around the world a little bit. I did, but prior to that, I did actually a bachelor's in management information systems. So I have a business degree. And from there, I got my first job in consulting. Really liked that consulting kind of lifestyle, traveling. A lot of the work that I did was in technology, but more around strategy and implementation of said strategies. I moved from Canada to London, England, where I worked for a really boutique consulting company. I was there for a couple of years, met some amazing people, amazing mentors who still mean a lot to me and guide me through various parts of my career and life. And from London, the company that I was working for was purchased by a larger organization. From there, ended up in New York, and from New York ended up in Chicago. Now, along the way, my career has grown. So we'll say just not well exponentially, right? I took bigger risks, bigger jumps and leaps, and took more responsibility. I went from just being an individual contributor, contributing my personal experience or personal opinions and ideas, to leading teams doing that. And what I loved, what I ended up realizing was it's not necessarily the actual act and work of say a particular industry. My main industry is the financial industry that I consult in or consulted in. And it wasn't about the industry, it was about the people that I was working with and trying to get the most out of them. And by most out of them, meaning what were the things that they wanted in life most. And me even sometimes telling them, hey, I think you want this. And them coming to this realization that, oh my God, I didn't even know that. And I ended up really focusing on my teams and my people, and that I built some amazing teams that way. And that's actually ultimately what helped my career. I found more joy and success in other people's success, and that's brought me from there, actually, like along that way, I was like, man, I should have done something in like psychology, or why did I not take a psych degree or whatever. But I actually subsequently went on to get my master's in industrial and organizational psychology. And yeah, and from there, I took I'm a certified emotional intelligence trainer. Now, I think this is where you and I are very complementary in that, I do have a lot of experience as well, but I think I'll add where necessary some of that academic background and nature, and maybe even just trying to tie it back to both of our experiences.
Sure. Yeah. I love that. No, that's awesome. And you're right. We do have that complementary relationship, and it's been not just with the content of the podcast, but also with some of the things we bring outside of the
Yeah.
podcast. Ismail is a master editor. I can barely use a mouse. So um, we have that going for ourselves. But Ismail, let me ask you, why are you passionate about leadership and emotional intelligence?
Great question. I feel like there's so much potential in people, and there are
Mm,
only a few small roadblocks and hurdles that get in their way, and it's generally themselves, right? They need to get out of their own way for them to be able to really shine. And there are some amazing people that I've seen that have just not done that and have kind of just faded into the crowd, whom would be amazing, amazing people. And then there's other folks who have realized that and have practiced what other people have preached and take advice and mentors and things like that, and have seen them flourish and turn into amazing leaders. And just there's it gives me goosebumps actually thinking about it, because I
goosies? You get
yeah,
goosies?
goose. Is that another word for them? Goosies. Uh, but yeah, I mean, I really love seeing people grow, and I I do that. I lead that way. I lead
Hmm.
by essentially helping others.
I love that. That is great. And I think that would align with my own kind of
Mhm.
leadership journey. And for me personally, I've always gravitated toward leadership roles. It's been something since I was a kid. I always was the quarterback. I loved being in the huddle and telling everybody, like, all right, guys, this is what we're going to do. We're going to put we got one down to score a touchdown. I'm going to throw you guys on my back and let's go,
I've seen this
Um,
firsthand in like that early Tennessee trip that we were talking about. You
yeah.
had that thing like project managed to the second. If we weren't on time,
Oh
we were
god,
going to hear
everybody hated me by the end of that trip.
but it worked out
Yeah, but
well.
I always gravitated though to those leadership roles even as a kid, quarterback. I always wanted to play point guard even though I was like not that fast or that skinny, but definitely had a lot of 8-second violations back in the day trying to get the ball past half court. But so, I love kind of being in that leadership role, but it's a lot to do with the same factors that you
Okay.
presented just now. It wasn't like self-centered. It wasn't for like my own self to get notoriety or attention. It was really because I liked helping other people reach their
Hmm.
goals. So, people management is really where my engagement with work
Gotcha.
lies.
Yeah, I totally understand.
I love I love managing people. In fact, at my previous company, for a little while, they put me into an individual contributor type of role, and like it was like kind of like retirement because, like when you're retired, I've never been retired, but I'm assuming when you're retired, like that first week, you're like, oh, this is great. Wake up, you make a fresh pot of coffee, you're kind of just looking around, like, all right, I got all this free time. What do I do? And that's how it felt. Like the first week, I was like, this is great. Like I have nobody's calling me saying they're sick or they need PTO. No one's asking for a raise. Nobody's telling me that they're unhappy. Um, but then after like a couple weeks, I was like, man, I kind of miss people asking me for stuff. I kind of miss helping people. I kind of missed all of that. And so, from not having a people leadership role, it really showed me how much I enjoy leading people. And I like inspiring people. I like working toward that collective goal and just clearing roadblocks for people. And I would also say that, and this is something that I practice every single day, is I'm a big believer in helping people reach their goals. I'm constantly trying to analyze what my people's aspirations are from their career, from their home life, and taking them to that goal, even if that isn't always in my best interest, right? But if it's in the person's best interest, I'm happy to do it, and I've done it. I've put people into positions to be successful for their own aspirations at the expense of myself many, many times. And it's always worked out, and that's kind of part of the deal. But that's sort of for me what drives me, what makes me passionate about leadership. And then as far as emotional intelligence is concerned, that is the secret ingredient that's helped me along the way, right? Like, I would say for me, like, I prioritize being a human being first as a leader, and practicing EQ and the EQ skills that come with it is really the only way to be a human. And so, um, I believe in it so much, and that's why I'm so passionate about this topic and this podcast and all of the stuff that we have shared and will continue to share over
Absolutely.
the years.
And I'm not sure if you remember the moment or time that you realized there was actually a name for those characteristics that you had. Because I remember, to me, it was like, oh man, I feel like I'm just a nice guy, or I feel like I'm too
Mm,
nice, or why do I care about that person's feelings? Or people ask me, why do you
yeah,
care about, what's going on at home? And me not having an answer for it. And then all of a sudden learning that there's something called emotional intelligence. It was just
yeah.
really eye-opening, and I hope that others
It was
experience that as well.
it was super validating. It was super validating because, I was always above average at school. Like, I was a good student. Um, I did fine in school, but like, it wasn't like how I made a name for myself was like, you know, being like the valedictorian of my high school or anything. And I always felt like, though, like, even against the most technically skilled people, like, I could go toe to toe with them because I have something like this X factor, and then being able to put that X factor, put a name on it, emotionally intelligent. When I learned about that concept in my life, like, I felt like limitless potential internally. I really felt like, wow, I have something that some people don't have, that it's actually um, super coveted, and it's going to help me. And it was awesome.
I think that's amazing. If we haven't already, at some point, we need to get your EQ actually measured, which you can do, because I bet you it's like mine, off the charts, and it'll
Mm,
just, it's a nice little pat on the back for being a nice person, right? But
yeah, yeah.
obviously you didn't get to where you are by yourself, and
Hmm.
so you had mentors and other leaders that you looked up to. I'm curious, what would you say the best leadership advice you've ever received was or is?
That's a great question. So, to answer that, I would have to think about, what do I think about the most when I'm encountering a difficult situation? Like, what advice or what moment am I constantly referencing back to? And I will say, for sure, it was uh, early on in my legal career, when I was a young lawyer. I was working for a small firm, and uh, I was going up against an opposing counsel that was super aggressive, super mean, very, very, like, just brash. And I felt like I was way in over my head. And I remember my senior attorney telling me, dude, you need to just be just as aggressive, and you need to just fire back and be like, like, start dropping F bombs and doing all that stuff, like, just like that person is. And so I was like, man, that doesn't sound like it's going to work. Let me call my brother-in-law, who is also an attorney out in New Jersey. I called him, and he gave me some advice, and he said, listen, man, the best way to get your way is to be yourself. And I remember that, like, him saying that, and it's just like something clicked in my head, that it was like, the best way to get your way is to be yourself. Um and I've applied that in all of my roles. And it's not just to get your way, but it's also to be yourself as a leader, right? Like, if I am if like early on, we talked about a lot of imposter syndrome for me, and it was a lot around, like, am I too nice?
Mm-hmm.
Like, are people going to take advantage of the fact that I don't, like, verbally accost them, or that I'm not mean, or that I don't, like, like, use, like, manipulative tactics, right? Like, am I going to be taken advantage of? But, like, as I progress in my career, I found out that actually those soft skills that I have, that communication skill, that empathy, the self-awareness, the social awareness, all of these EQ skills are actually the reason that I am a really good leader. And it's the reason why people like to work for me, and why my teams are successful. And so, for me, being myself was all I needed to do. And being okay with being myself and not questioning myself. And so his advice really helped me to start thinking in that way. And so I would say for me, the best advice I've gotten was the best way to get your way is to be yourself. And so I've really applied that throughout my leadership journey.
That's amazing. That's great.
Yeah. How about yourself?
It's actually, I would have to probably say, very similar to yours.
Hmm.
I'm not going to say any names, but this manager he was really, it's just, he himself had very high EQ and was
Hmm.
very smart. And
Hmm.
but he always was able to, he was always willing to help. And
Hmm.
this is one of those occasions where I was just really forthcoming with some of my insecurities and challenges that I had, and they were around the fact that I wasn't able to generally go toe to toe with someone on the spot in the moment.
Mm.
And it was, and so I would actually end up getting into really sticky situations just by saying wrong things because I felt like I had to respond.
Mm.
And he noticed that. He actually knows. He came to me and started talking to me about it. And he was calling me out on a few things, which was great because I was ready to learn. I always have been. I really want
Hmm.
for people to keep kind of challenging me. And one the way he phrased something, which was similar to what you were explaining, the way he phrased it was, he's like, you have to be true to yourself. You have to be honest. In
Mm.
every conversation, you have to be
Mm.
honest. And that means when you make a mistake, you own up to it and you own it. Like you
Mm.
really, really own that problem. If you feel like you're right, being true and honest and saying why you think you're right. And what he started like doing those little examples and me practicing them. And what came out was, out of the end of that, he was like, look, you're a good person. You're never going to screw anyone over. You're never going to
Hmm.
hurt anyone, right? You're
Hmm.
always there to help. And if you just essentially be yourself, he's like,
Mm.
be honest, you're going to do just fine. And that for me, it was just a moment. And there have been a couple of these along the way, but I just loved that he called that out for me, and something that I knew that I did, but I couldn't really factor it
Yeah.
into how to be good at my job. And really, it was
Hmm.
just continue doing what I'm doing. Don't do the stupid stuff. Don't do the things that
Yeah.
you think you should be doing,
You think you
right?
should do.
Do the
Yeah.
things.
That's where I've always gotten myself
Yeah.
into trouble is doing the things that I thought I needed to be doing.
Yeah, I mean, and
Um,
it's very easy to do, isn't it? Because you see everyone else
it
doing it,
is.
but then you realize
Yeah.
you're like, well, not everyone is a leader. Like, what makes those people good? Like, who they are? And you're like, not everyone is like this. Not every great leader is like this, but the ones that really stand out to me are those that have that, what I call the je ne sais quoi, that high EQ, and we gravitate to each other, you and I, and we want to share that with other people. And he allowed me, he essentially uh, let me give permission to myself to be able to do that unabashedly without any fear. He said, this is the thing to do. Not even right, not even wrong. It is the thing to do. And I'll always cherish that and appreciate him for that. And I will try and pay it forward as much as I can. I don't think I can pay it forward in the ways that he did for me, but I will always try.
No, that's great. That's great. It is really like there are these moments where something just clicks and you remember those moments. They stick with you. And I know personally I'm always drawing from those moments when
Mm-hmm.
I'm encountering something in the present. So yeah, this has been a lot of fun. I enjoyed getting to even know you. I thought I knew you well enough, but I even learned some stuff about you in this episode.
I hope we constantly are learning about each other throughout this entire journey for the rest of our
Yeah,
lives. I
no,
hope we do.
I agree 100%. And I hope that you all enjoyed getting to know us, on this bonus episode that we as a joke called Meet the Gents, but I think that's just what we're going to stick with. It's the Meet the Gents episode. And we look forward to a really long journey with all of you, and continuing to uh, provide you guys with insights, practical tips, stories, examples of our leadership journey, and help you all become better leaders. And, in the process, build a community with you all is really our end goal. So we'll continue to engage with you guys on social media, YouTube, our website, newsletters, and things that are forthcoming. So there's a lot yet to be done, and we know that. But we're excited about reaching episode 10. It's been quite a journey so far.
And we really appreciate everyone's support. And we hope, if you feel like you have something to ask us, or you want to know, or that you want to know personally about us, feel free to reach out. You can reach us in so many ways. You can find, if you go to our website, Intelli-Gents.com, you'll find many ways to contact us. And I just want to thank everyone out there.
Yep, we'll definitely be doing more of these, some of these longer bonus episodes, and also some short form content on Instagram and TikTok, LinkedIn, and things, just to connect with you guys more in a more informal setting. So thank you all for listening, and we look forward to continuing to talk to y'all. Thanks. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of the Emotional Intelli-Gents podcast. We hope you found it informative and enjoyable. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. And if you have a moment, we'd really appreciate it if you could leave a review on your favorite platform. Your feedback helps us improve and reach more people.